You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 24th of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing, in association with Addis. And welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Coming up on today's programme.
Following multiple telecommunications-related imminent threats directed towards senior U.S. government officials this spring, the U.S. Secret Service began a protective intelligence investigation to determine the extent and impact these threats could have on protective operations.
Well, turns out could have been considerable. The Secret Service revealed it could have disrupted the UN General Assembly. We'll get reaction to that other disruptor, Donald Trump. Then,
after our Librarian of Congress was fired, Dr. Hayden, we immediately received an email from the German National Library saying there are hundreds of German librarians who know all too well the significance of this.
We'll hear about a new film that examines the book bans in the US and the librarians fighting back. And finally, the shortlist for the Booker Prize has dropped. We'll find out more about the 6 writers in contention for the world's most significant literary fiction award. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. As the United Nations General Assembly rolls on in New York, reactions have been coming in to US President Donald Trump's bizarre speech yesterday. It's also been revealed that the Secret Service, as well as being called upon to investigate why the escalator Trump travelled on yesterday came to an abrupt halt, has also dismantled a vast telecoms network that could have disrupted the entire gathering. Well, joining me from New York is journalist H.J. Mai. H.J., welcome back to the show. Talking about disruption, I understand that the city is gridlocked. How is the New York infrastructure coping with the influx of more than 150 delegations, complete with motorcades and security teams?
Yeah, you're right. And thanks for having me again, Georgina. The streets around the UN General Assembly are really, closed off. If you don't have to be in Manhattan during this time, people try to avoid it. But besides that, it's New York. So, it's always hustle and bustle. You hear sirens everywhere, but it's definitely hard to get around town. I can confirm that.
What do we know about this telecom security threat uncovered by the Secret Service?
Yeah, as you mentioned, there was this investigation by the Secret Service. The New York Police Department also had some involvement. But what they basically uncovered was that some threat actor, they think it might be, a state-sponsored threat actor, but they don't have that information yet, has set up basically, an encrypted, somewhat fake telecommunications network. They apparently located several places around the New York City area. They said within 35 miles of New York City, where they found 100,000 SIM cards, which, as you know, we use in our cell phones and our mobile phones everywhere, and servers. And basically the threat there was that if those all would log on to, the cellular network here in the US, or particularly in the New York area, that would lead to disruption and could potentially, take down the whole cellular network. And, as world leaders are in town, as, we private citizens rely heavily on the cellular network, that would have, caused major disruptions.
Now, the Secret Service is also being urged to investigate why the escalator Trump was on stopped abruptly. Now, the White House says sabotage. The UN says it was just bad luck. Is it being taken at all seriously?
It depends who you ask. Clearly the White House takes it seriously. The fact that the Secret Service has been asked to investigate, is interesting. The UN spokesperson was asked about it, and, he said that it was just an accident, that somebody who was on the escalator before President Trump and First Lady Melania must have, instigated or touched a button that stopped the escalator, so it was just an accident. But yeah, I think most people, after listening to yesterday's speech, don't really take a lot of, credibility when it comes to that was sabotage. The same with his complaint about the teleprompter not working. He complained about the teleprompter not working. The UN said, well, we had no involvement in this. This is actually something that the White House was in charge of. So it really depends, who you ask. But I think the majority doesn't really believe there was any nefarious or any sabotage going on.
Trump himself seems to be taken a lot more seriously than his last appearance at the UN when he was laughed at by delegates. He gave a rambling, odd speech 4 times longer than his allotted time, attacking the institution, the UN itself, and reiterating many, many untruths. HJ, how are you interpreting the reactions to Trump's speech? I mean, there wasn't laughter. Was that stunned silence? Was it acquiescence? What are delegates saying?
Yeah, the delegates I spoke with tried to, tread very, very carefully. Nobody came to me and said this was a fantastic speech and they agreed with everything. But like so many things, Trump points out issues that are actual issues. I think, it's without a question that, the effectiveness of the UN can be questioned, has to be questioned. But the question is it the best way to do it in such a direct and forward manner? I think there were a lot of agreement that the UN needs reform, but we've been hearing this for years now. But then also, a lot of people push back, especially when it comes to his take on migration and energy and climate policies that he pretty much criticized his European allies for and basically told the world that your countries, because of those 2 things, are going to hell. So the reaction has been, interestingly, actually somewhat muted. Nobody has really come out and really, taking it apart and said this was completely unhinged, like some newspapers did. But people try to pick it apart and try to point out the misinformation, the lies that were in this speech, but also, point to the things that, like I said, like the ineffectiveness of the United Nations, that, we should really take a look at this and reform has to happen within that body.
I'd like to bring in our Monocle foreign editor now, Alexis Self. Alexis, thanks for coming down. Can you give us a snapshot of reactions from here in Europe to what Trump said? HJ just referred to it as unhinged.
Yes, good afternoon, Georgina. I think that's a fair assessment, although I think, as HJ was saying, the reaction from continental Europe has been quite muted, and I think that's largely due to the fact that there was very encouraging for them remarks by Trump regarding Ukraine, and I think they're crossing their fingers that might mean a kind of reaffirmation of support or some sort of game-changing intervention by the Americans in Ukraine. There's been quite strong reaction from London, from Labour MPs particularly, given that Trump attacked the Labour mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and said that the capital wanted to go to Sharia law. That's quoting him. And actually Wes Streeting, the health secretary, who on Monday reacted quite strongly to Trump's claims regarding Tylenol, or paracetamol, as it's known in the UK, and taking it during pregnancy. And he then followed up with support for Sadiq Khan on X. So I think, and there's a few Labour MPs, backbenchers, who have come out and said, Rupa Huck, for example, who's an MP for Ealing, quite near to where we're talking right now, called the remarks unhinged, poppycock and complete cobblers. So I think that's the mood in London, yeah.
Alexis, just before you go, we've just seen the state visit and Keir Starmer was there, Kemi Badenoch was there, both leaders of the big parties. The leader of the Lib Dems was not, and he seems to be the only person, the only senior political party leader in this country who's talking back to Trump.
Yeah, I think Ed Davey, who you're referring to there, is in the Lib Dems are in quite a comfortable position regarding Trump. I think there's no chance that they've just won their most MPs ever in their history last year. So they have representation in Parliament, and they're trying to kind of drive a wedge between themselves and Labour and the Conservatives and Reform. And I think this is one way that they can do that. So I think it's tactically, and obviously it suits, I think, the kind of voter that they're trying to appeal to, which is a kind of softer Conservative, probably in the south of England, people who they got a lot of votes from last year. And Ed Davies very much made that his issue, which, one might argue is tactically savvy, given that most polls suggest that the majority of British people are very anti-Trump. But yes, it is remarkable for sure.
It was their party congress, and I felt so sorry for the poor man yesterday, because there he was competing with Donald Trump, and I was toggling between the two speeches. I have to tell you, one of them came across as very, very sane.
Yeah.
Guess what? Alexis, thank you very much indeed. That's Alexis Self, Monocle's foreign editor, and H.J. Mai, who is in New York for us. Now, here's Hassan Anderson with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. Typhoon Ragasa, the world's strongest storm this year, has weakened from super to severe typhoon status, but remains highly destructive. China has evacuated nearly 2 million people from the southern province of Guangdong as the storm draws closer to the region. In Taiwan, at least 14 people have been killed and 124 missing following severe flooding. Swarms of drones have targeted a flotilla of Gaza-bound aid ships carrying around 500 volunteers. Passengers on several vessels currently situated near Greece reported explosions and communication disruptions in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Israel has promised to take the necessary measures to stop it from breaking the sea siege of Gaza. And Demna, the Georgian designer who reinvented Balenciaga, unveiled his first Gucci collection in a Spike Jonze co-directed film yesterday. The cinematic debut marks Kering's bid to revive the storied Italian label after 2 years of sliding sales. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thanks, Hassan. A new documentary, The Librarians, follows the people at the centre of America's book wars after Texas lawmaker Matt Krause circulated a list of 850 titles, most dealing with race or LGBTQ plus subjects. Librarians found themselves on the receiving end of bans, harassment and even threats of prosecution. Once seen as community caretakers, they've become unlikely hate figures for the right and frontline defenders of democracy and the freedom to read. Well, joining me now is the director of the film, Kim A. Snyder. Kim, many thanks for coming to talk to us. And I must just say how much I appreciated the film. I thought it was such an important work and so beautifully made. I wondered what made you want to tell the story now, and how did you find the librarians willing to go on camera?
Well, thanks for having us. It started really back in for my journey back in the fall of 21, after this list of 850 books called the Krause List was issued in Texas. And I learned about a group of librarians calling themselves the Freedom Fighters that were speaking back, that were and organizing others. And I became quickly connected with them and went to Texas, and they started to connect me with others, including Amanda.
Mm. And some of the librarians in the film became hate figures almost overnight. What did you learn about the personal toll this took on Amanda and others, and why they refused to back down?
Well, honestly, the first foray into this with those original folks in Texas was shocking to me. And then it became even more shocking to learn how many librarians, the few that are featured in our film are just a few of so many voices of librarians who have now, since we've shown the film, even come forward to say, this is exactly my story. And it's not just in Texas and Florida. We've met librarians throughout the entire country as we've traversed since our Sundance premiere in Maine and in Utah, all over the states, and actually here in UK, we're starting to hear stories.
Tell me more about what you're finding out about Britain.
Well, Actually, today we're going to show the film at the Bodleian at Oxford, but Amanda can speak more to it. But we're learning that there are some of these organized efforts that I think begin on our side of the pond with folks like the Moms for Liberty and those scripts, and that organization is being exported. And we're learning that it is hitting districts and libraries here. So we're actually today going to learn more because we're meeting behind closed doors with some of those librarians.
Amanda Jones, if I could just bring you in now, and if you just tell me about your role in this and how then you see this Kraus list and what's happening, this bigger national or perhaps even international strategy of censorship fitting into the wider rise of extremism that's traced in the film.
Well, I'm a school librarian by trade, but I was originally targeted for speaking out against censorship in my own hometown in Louisiana for my public library. And I was, I just gave a speech at a public library and I was instantly became a target of right-wing extremists, received death threats, have been doxxed and harassed, defamed. Pretty much my entire community at one point turned against me. And I realized that it's not just me. There's thousands of us all across the United States. And the Kraus list has been taken by different extremist groups and adapted all over the United States. And it has started spreading. So if book banning and censorship attempts fit into the wider scheme of things, because not only are they attacking books and stories, but they're attacking people and they're in history. And we're seeing that spread into education. It's spreading into museums and national parks, even in the United States. And so it's all a concerted effort to silence voices, marginalize people that have already been, communities that have already been historically marginalized. And it's all about money and power and authoritarianism.
And finally, Kim, looking beyond the US, what do you think audiences in other countries take away from this battle?
I think that what we intended with the film was to weave a mosaic that, yes, this is happening in the United States. We are exporting this kind of extremism, but I think we want to see this, or we have seen it hitting a nerve. One of the most poignant things was after our Librarian of Congress was fired, Dr. Hayden, we immediately received an email from the German National Library saying there are hundreds of German librarians who know all too well the significance of this. So we do, as Amanda said, see this as right out of a playbook of what we've seen throughout time. That is something I would like people to take away from it, that this isn't a myopic story about culture wars in America or pronouns in the classroom. This is something much more concerning and nefarious. And indeed, these librarians without borders, if you will, are firewall.
Kim, thank you very much indeed. That was Kim A. Snyder, who's the director of the film The Librarians, and Amanda Jones, a school librarian. The film opens in UK cinemas on Friday and in the US on October the 3rd. And if you care about these issues, do consider joining your local chapter of PEN, the global human rights organisation that defends the freedom to write and the freedom to read. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, Sarah Jessica Parker is the executive producer of The Librarians, the film we've just been talking about. She's also one of the judges of this year's Booker Prize, the world's most significant award for a work of fiction. Well, last night, the shortlist was unveiled. 6 novels that span continents and styles, from a taut 200-page study of family tensions to a 700-page epic that took 2 decades to complete. The list includes past winners and shortlistees alongside 3 authors making their debut on the list. Well, to take us inside the judges' decision-making, I'm joined by writer and critic Chris Power, one of this year's panel. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Georgina.
The long list, chosen from 153 submissions, was already very strong. How hard was it to get down to just 6, and what qualities were you looking for above all else?
I think the qualities we were looking for were really books that, transported us, that immersed us, that sort of brought us round to their way of thinking, whatever style, whatever subject they were written in and addressing. It was very difficult to answer the first part of your question, to sort of say goodbye to a few that if our long list had been longer, would have been on it. But then, that process of getting 13 books that really were extraordinary in their own right, down to 6 was, it was very, very hard.
Well, let's go through those books. So Susan Choi's Flashlight, that moves from post-war Japan to the US. It mixes family drama and geopolitics. What won it a place on your list?
It's an extraordinary book. It's, in some ways, I'm very happy that we're drawing attention to it, but in other ways, I think it's one of those books that the less you know about it going in, kind of the more extraordinary the impact of that first reading is. But it's just a beautifully written book that covers this huge expanse of time, I think, from just immediately post-war Japan to pretty much the present day. And through the story of Louisa, the daughter, and Anne and Cirque, her mother and father, just really, it contains so much emotionally and politically and psychologically that it's really, really an extraordinary work.
Kieran Desai, back nearly 20 years after the inheritance of loss, with The Loneliness of Sonia and Sonny. It's almost 700 pages long. What strikes you about this book?
Well, this one really operates on a number of different levels. Like she's great at a kind of epic sweep of story that really catches you up like a current, and also these tiny details. There are no character is too minor to kind of have a fully fleshed out backstory and some sort of tang that persists in your mind as you read. So as you read, you just experience this whole world. Your mind gets more and more peopled with Desai's imagination.
Now, Katie Kitamura's Audition, this kind of plays with perspective. It's an unusual book, isn't it? What impressed the judges?
This is just a real masterpiece of construction, I think. It's an ingenious book, and it does sort of, it wrong foots you, particularly kind of exactly in the center of the book. It breaks off into a sort of, you're not sure what at first, a phantasmagoria. It takes a woman, an actress who's auditioning, rehearsing a play on Broadway, and has an encounter with a man who thinks he's her son. And then the second half of the novel kind of dissolves this border between what might be true and what's actually true and what might just be imagination. It's a real existential puzzle of a book.
Now, Ben Markovitz gives us The Rest of Our Lives, and this appears to blend a road trip, a family saga, and a basketball novel. Tell us more.
Well, it's about a man called Tom Laywood who's in his, I guess, early 50s, and his wife had an affair a number of years ago, and he made a promise to himself back then that when his youngest daughter went away to college, he was going to leave, and he's sort of forgotten about it. But then when he drops his youngest daughter off at college, he keeps driving, and this road trip is a kind of a journey into himself and a journey into modern America, in the sense that sort of many middle-aged, both men and women, get to a stage in their life where they kind of think, well, yeah, what do I do now? What is my purpose? And it evokes that stage of life so beautifully.
Now, Andrew Miller's The Land in Winter has already won prizes this year. It's set against an unforgettable winter. What stood out to you about it?
Yeah, it's set during the winter of 62, 63, a kind of famously harsh and punishing winter. And it focuses on these two couples, a rural GP and his wife, and a kind of a novice farmer and his wife. And they're sort of, learning to navigate these roles and struggling. And the weather brilliantly kind of binds them in place. It traps them and accentuates the way that they're also trapped in their lives. But, you know, Miller really delivers a kind of a narrative tour de force. Like they do get shaken out of this trappedness in all sorts of extraordinary ways.
Finally, tell us about Flesh.
Flesh by David Zaloy is a life story, more or less. It starts in the teenage years of a Hungarian boy called István, and we follow him. He goes to Iraq, he serves a tour there, and then he winds up in London. He's a doorman at a strip club. He becomes a sort of, bodyguard and driver to the super rich. He ascends to extraordinary wealth himself. And then I won't say more of his trajectory, so I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But it's an extraordinarily pared down novel. I mean, it's called Flesh, but it's really more like bone. You know, it's really taken down to, and it shows how much you can actually invest a character with emotion while not doing the traditional, normal things that a novelist would do to give you character. I mean, it limits interiority to an extraordinary degree.
And Chris, pulling back from the individual works, what does this shortlist tell us about fiction in 2025, where writers are pushing boundaries and what readers are hungry for?
I mean, I would say that it's odd because, you know, we've spent sort of 7 months sort of focusing on each book in its own right, rather than saying, well, we want a long list that expresses this, or we want a short list that stands for that. But I would say, looking at the books now, almost like coming out of a fever dream and sort of taking stock. I mean, what I really love about the short list and loved about the long list is that it's a tremendously diverse array of writing styles and approaches to fiction. And I think it shows that, you know, writers will either tell the stories that are most suited to their narrative gifts or change their narrative style to suit the story that they're telling. And I think these writers are good enough to adapt in that way, or their styles are strong enough that those stories really are served by their writing.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. That was Chris Power, one of the judges of the Booker Prize 2025. The winner will be announced on November the 10th. And if you are planning to order these books, be careful not to combine the titles of Flesh and Flashlight, which might produce an unexpected reading experience. That's all for this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Tom Webb. Our researcher was Daniela Braw-Smith and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Goodbye and thanks for listening.